Good afternoon, everybody. Today is April 15th, 2026. This is the Transportation Finance and Policy Committee. We do have a quorum. Thanks for being here. There is one bill in front of us at the end of the meeting. We'll shouldn't be spending too much time on that. But before we do that, we will just spend some committee time better understanding how transit and transportation finance works, especially in the Metro Transit area. But before we go to that, Vice Chair Ream, have you had a chance to look at the minutes for Tuesday, April 13th, 2026? And if so, would you be willing to move them, please?
Thank you, Chair Koznick. Yes, I have had a moment to look at the minutes, and I move to approve the minutes for April 13th, 2026.
Vice Chair Ream has moved the minutes. Any questions, or all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are adopted. I just missed the introduction, Chair Tapke, but we will do the Joy Bill towards the end. But we will just proceed with our presentation from the Met Council on Regional Transit and Governance Finance. So presenting for the Met Council is Charles Carlson, Executive Director of Metropolitan Transportation Services. We have a PowerPoint. It's online. Welcome. Thank you for putting some of this information together for us. Help us better understand and use this time to be more informed. So introduce yourself and just proceed with your presentation. And members, since we do have a little bit more time today, if you have a question, I think it probably, I don't want to bog down the presentation, but if you do have a question relevant to the slides, feel free to let us know and we'll try to be a little more free-flowing, but again, saving time for the final bill later. So welcome, Mr. Carlson. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Provide me just 1 second to get this set.
And while we try to get the PowerPoint up there, this is our last scheduled meeting for this session, so thank you to all the members for the work and discussion, and those are the members that of the public that have followed and paid attention. Special recognition to my committee administrator, Mr. Joe Marble. This is his last scheduled meeting as he's retiring. Is that official? Possibly?
End of the year.
End of the year. So much gratitude for your work over many years and your work with me as co-chair the last 2 years. So we have the presentation up, correct? And we're ready to go now?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Charles Carlson. I serve as Executive Director for Metropolitan Transportation Services at the Met Council.
If you could pull the microphone towards you a little bit, I think
Sure
I'll pick it up a little better here in the room.
Is that any better?
That is a little better.
A bit. At the committee's request, we prepared some information today on a variety of topics. This will begin with transit governance evolution over time. We'll talk about transit funding. We'll talk about current roles and responsibilities within the metropolitan area transportation transit system. We will talk about the funding allocations both in statute and by the Metropolitan Council in its role, as well as the implementation of the 2023 transportation bill that pretty significantly reshaped how we provide transit service or how we fund transit within the metropolitan area. So beginning with governance, the legislature has led periodic changes in how transit is governed in the region through periods of consolidation and fragmentation and consolidation and fragmentation. And briefly, the system dates back quite a ways. In July of 1872, private industry began a transit system with horse cars operating in downtown St. Paul. That grew to become a significant streetcar system operating region-wide, and then switched over to a bus system, all led by private industry that was supported in large part by passenger fares, but really by land development and the ability to develop land by extending the transportation system and replace walking with transit. Eventually, the capital assets of that private system were failing. In 1967, the public stepped in, first with formation of the Met Council to guide regional growth, but also with formation of the Metropolitan Transit Commission to acquire failing private transit systems, and that began in that time frame. Across the 1970s, under public leadership, the transit system experienced significant growth. It acquired other private systems, it significantly expanded service, and faced a number of financial challenges in response to that growth, especially compounded by inflation in the late 1970s and the energy crisis that presented both significant increases in demand for transit, but also cost pressures on the transit system. So that presented a number of different challenges for the MTC over that time. Around then, Project Mobility began, which would go on to become Metro Mobility, the paratransit service that we operate now. And the Transportation Advisory Board was formed to advise the council on transportation issues across the region. While not specifically focused on transit, it did help the council perform its mission as the metropolitan planning organization for the region. In the 1980s, the legislature authorized formation of county regional railroad authorities. This was largely a product of federal deregulation. The Staggers Act was passed that deregulated the railroad industry. That provided a local role for counties to respond to railroad deregulation. County rail authorities were authorized by the legislature in 1980 and began to form. That started a path that counties became more and more involved in transit planning as a result of right-of-way often acquired through the rail authorities and then would be available for future transit use. Suburban cities were also at that time permitted to opt out of the MTC area and keep what at the time were primarily property tax revenues for transit operations. We'll talk more about this in the context of funding on the next slide. What this allowed was for these suburban cities, and 12 of them in total elected this option before the legislature closed it in 1984. They could operate their own system separate from MTC, and so those formed across the 1980s. In 1984, the legislature also provided a further fragmentation of transit governance by forming the Regional Transit Board that was formed to oversee budgeting, to provide mid-range transportation planning, and to overall allocate funds across transit providers in the region. That governance structure continued for roughly 10 years in coordination with other legislative changes on other metropolitan systems, such as wastewater and others. The legislature consolidated operations within the Met Council by abolishing the MTC, abolishing the Regional Transit Board, and then assigning those functions to the Metropolitan Council to execute. So Metro Transit formed from that as a service of the Metropolitan Council and has operated since 1994 in that capacity. The suburban transit providers, or as they're defined in law, replacement service municipalities, remained in 1994 as standalone providers. So 32 years ago, established more or less the current operating framework for transit in the region. But in terms of governance, it also merits mention and important inclusion of 2008, when 5 counties with legislative authority were able to form the County's Transit Improvement Board that advanced the funding of the transitway system. So this didn't change the roles of operations or executing the transitway system, but did afford a means of funding it as well as directing priorities and eligible projects for that funding. The County's Transit Improvement Board dissolved by its members in 2017 so that counties could advance under separate legislation at increased rates to continue the construction of the system, which we'll talk about as we move along. But in summary, the legislature has directed the formation of transit in the region, as well as periodic consolidations and fragmentations over the last 59 years.
Mr. Carlson, if I could have you touch base, I think that's a really good synopsis of kind of the evolution. The significance of the tab, can you, for my clarification and the public, the role of the tab, and sometimes I hear dissolve the Met Council and this or that. If you did, if that was ever to happen, there's a good reason, I think something to do with the tab would significantly change as they're grandfathered in or something? Are you,
Yep.
don't mean to put you on the spot, but if
Sure.
you could touch base on that, I think it's important for the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy to. So the Transportation Advisory Board is created in state statute to advise the council as it carries out its role as the Metropolitan Planning Organization as defined federally, and to advise the council as it prepares the transportation plan of the Regional Development Guide, which is more commonly known as the Transportation Policy Plan. So TAB's role is really in state statute. It doesn't have bearing on the council's federal designation other than that relationship to the state. The TAB is an advisory board to the council. The council is the MPO. There's no qualifier about the council as the MPO in relation to TAB. It's really just federally, the council is the MPO, and then at the state level, the legislature formed TAB to advise the council in carrying out those duties.
Okay, I'll follow up a little bit more after that, but it was my understanding from a Met Council member that the makeup of the tab is kind of unique in our MPO region, that if there was some different kind of reiteration of the planning organization, it would change that grandfathering significantly, I think.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if the structure of the Met Council were to change and that were a significant enough change to require redesignation, then the council would be subject to requirements in law which are prescribed in federal law, and we could certainly discuss that further with you.
Yeah, we don't want to bog down your presentation, but please proceed.
Thank you. This slide speaks to the evolution of funding, which has had relationships to governance over time, but in large part it has actually evolved in parallel. So for a long time, the transit system was funded by fares, by passenger fares, and by land speculation and development funds, as I mentioned earlier. That was exhausted over time. So the rolling stock was aging between the late 50s and the mid 60s. The Twin Cities lines did not buy one single new bus, and that led to a system that was in poor condition in the late 1960s. A strike within the public or the privately owned company actually accelerated a public takeover, with the governor intervening late, and that really setting the course for a 1970 initiated acquisition of the private system by the public that would ultimately be settled in 1975. So that made the system go from a failing public system to a failing private system to an expanding public system beginning in 1970. That coincided with common occurrences of this all around the country. So by and large, across the 1970s, transit systems became public services, moving away from what had been private systems prior to that. The federal government recognized that occurrence, recognized its role, and authorized funding both for system acquisition as well as operating funds. So federal funds were a significant source of transit operating dollars between 1974 and 1998. State funds were issued around that time on a performance basis. So actually the MTC would receive a subsidy from the state on a per passenger basis for a period of time. You might imagine that incentivized the MTC to provide service in their highest ridership areas and not in other areas because they would not receive state funds for that. And then simultaneously, property taxes were, between the 70s and 2001, the primary source of transit operations, as well as transit capital funding within a legislatively defined metropolitan area transit district. I should say that the capital levy was actually feathered, so different areas of the region would pay different capital levy rates depending on the proportionate level of service across the taxing district. So that structure remained in place for quite a while, a mix of federal, state, but primarily property tax revenues that endured across some of the governance changes that we mentioned previously until the state made a significant change in 2001, which was to prohibit the use of property tax for transit operating funds. So this ended the role of local funds on property tax within transit operations. It coincided with the end of federal operating assistance from the federal government. Capital funds would continue, as well as a very small amount of operating eligibility of federal grants in major metropolitan areas. And so to respond to these challenges and this loss of property tax funds and federal assistance, the legislature directed first a general fund phase-in and then ongoing motor vehicle sales tax funding source for transit operations. So 2001 was a major change in terms of how transit operations are paid for in the region.
I think we have a, Rep. Anderson, do you have a question?
Yeah, can I interrupt? So in 2000, can you talk a little bit about the rail? So when the Fed stopped, I think it's important that people know this. So when the Fed stopped giving money for operations, they did give money and beef up for physical construction. And that was the point in time when the rail became a bit. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think people need to know that.
Yep,
how it
thank you,
happened. Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair, Member Anderson. That is absolutely correct. The federal government continued a significant capital investment program, both on a formula basis, but also through its what's called the Capital Investment Grant Program that preceded 2001, but certainly became more and more popular. And this region tapped into those funds beginning around that time as well. So prior to then, rail development in this region had periods of advancement, and then the legislature would prohibit rail planning. Then it reauthorized it and would prohibit it again until around 2001. There was really building consensus around pursuing at least a first line, and it evolved from there. So the federal government has been significantly involved in funding of capital build out, including fixed guideway systems like our light rail. So as that continued, there was a amendment.
If we could hold off for a second.
Sure thing.
Representative Sensenbrenner has a question.
Thank you. My question is, can you just explain a little bit about the phase out of the property taxes and why that happened?
Mr. Chair, Representative, others perhaps on this committee may recall more details about it, but really it was a concern about the local property tax burden, as I understand it, and a desire to lower local property taxes and replace them with other sources. Motor vehicle sales tax continued to emerge as one of the most important sources for transit funding, as well as transportation funding more generally. And in 2006, Minnesota voters approved an amendment to the state constitution that actually dedicates that source to these uses. MVEST had been an important source, but this actually accelerated and increased it, and also split it into two different sources. So at that time, 21.5% of MVEST had been used on transit, but not dedicated for that purpose, and then 36% for the metro, or for transit was codified following that amendment. What also happened in that time frame is that motor vehicle sales tax was underperforming and it was volatile. So it did not end up being a reliable ongoing source of transit funding, especially as exacerbated by recessionary impacts in 2008. When households were facing significant financial constraints with the Great Recession, buying a new car was really the bottom of the list of priorities. And when buying a new car is the source of transit operating funds, it really created a shortage of funds as that transition and phase-in was occurring. The state, as we'll mention in a moment, had a greater role in response to that underperformance. At the same time, county light rail operating funds were an important source. The Hiawatha LRT, now the Blue Line, began operations in June of 2004. Hennepin County was an important partner in funding that. And then in 2008, the state actually passed a law that requires state investment for half of the cost after passenger fares and federal revenues of LRT operations, and that would stay on the books until 2023. So the state and the county had important roles that would continue across that period. The formation of the county's Transit Improvement Board also shaped that, so the counties had even greater participation in funding of the growing transitway system. That helped the council implement those lines, as one of the significant factors for federal investment was commitment of local funds between the state and the counties. That commitment was in place. At the same time, invest shortages continued, and the state did not want to see significant reduction in transit, so the state passed a number of one-time appropriations to essentially fill ongoing structural deficits with non-structural solutions coming primarily from the general fund. So that continued until the COVID-19 pandemic actually reshaped a lot of things. And one of the biggest changes that occurred with that was reintroduction of federal operating assistance from the federal government. So federal COVID relief temporarily replaced state general fund obligations as a major source of transit operating funds. Over $700 million from the feds was used across that time period. Those funds were concluding in 2023, and that led to a large transit funding gap that had gone from state general fund to temporary state general fund to temporary federal COVID relief funds to a looming deficit, not because of significant expansion, but because of the replacement of one-time sources. So at that time, coming into the 2023 session, the council was facing a large transit structural operating deficit. The 2023 legislature passed a new funding source, the regional 3/4-cent transportation sales tax, that did important things. It stabilized and replaced that ongoing structural deficit. It replaced county transitway operating funds to the region, and it reduced state appropriations into the future by removing the requirement that the state pay for 50% of rail operating costs, although the state did continue state general fund appropriations, though it reduced it in 2025. And then finally, the Special Transportation Services Program, more commonly known as Metro Mobility, and its sibling program, Metro Move, based on a law passed in 2021, effective in 2025, moved that program into a state forecast-based program. And so essentially that has become a program of the state that the council operates, and that transition is now complete. That brings us to current roles and responsibilities within the transitway system under this new funding structure. So the Metropolitan Council is the regional transit agency. Metro Transit provides the directly operated bus and rail transit, serving 6 counties and 65 metro area cities. So the 2 center cities and 63 suburbs. Metro Transit operates Maple Grove Transit Express service, as well as North Star bus service into Sherburne County under contract to the city of Maple Grove and to MnDOT for the North Star bus service. The council's other transit operating division is Metropolitan Transportation Services, as I lead, as shared today. Within that group, we do 2 important functions. One is that we operate, we provide staffing for the council's role as the MPO, so long-range transportation planning, short-term programming, and other functions as the MPO, including staffing the TAB process as described earlier. We operate the Special Transportation Service Program, Metro Mobility and Metro Move, and then we operate contracted transit operations that complement and extend the reach of Metro Transit with regular out service, with on-demand microtransit service, and with Transit Link, which serves the full 7-county region. The council also allocates some transit funds regionally and administers state funds, as we'll see in a moment. Suburban transit providers are continue in the region.
If we
yeah,
could hold
Mr.
up
Chair.
for one question, Representative Sensimura.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question about the Maple Grove specifically. Can you explain to me how they are an opt-out if Met Council is providing their services?
Sure thing, Mr. Chair, Representative. Maple Grove is a replacement service municipality. They contract their service to Metro Transit, so they have an agreement with Metro Transit to operate service on their behalf.
Follow-up?
Yes, thank you. So in effect then, if if the Met Council and Metro Transit is running their buses, what makes them an opt-out then?
Yeah,
Mr. Carlson?
Mr. Chair, Representative, they receive funds from the council under both the statutory and formula allocations that we'll describe in a couple slides going forward. So they have control over those funds. They use those funds to hire Metro Transit to operate a portion of their services.
Okay. Representative Jones, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Carlson. Question, what is Metro Move?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative, Metro Move is a program that the council began in 2024 that operates a program similar to Metro Mobility, but it actually uses a different set of eligibility that falls under 3 waiver service programs. So we are able to provide service as a waiver transportation service provider, and that helps us leverage both human service funds as well as federal Medicaid funds. That reduces the burden on the state general fund to operate Metro Mobility by tapping into those other sources. So there's 3 specific waivers that we provide. It's 100% a standing order pre-scheduled service, although we are planning to move into some demand-based rides on that program.
Great. Appreciate that question, too. Vice Chair Ream.
Thank you, Chair Kozak. So just to clarify, so suburbs like Plymouth and Maple Grove, don't they contract with other suburban bus companies like Southwest Transit? That's my understanding, that Plymouth also contracts with Southwest Transit to provide services?
Mr. Chair, Representative, so the suburban providers provide service in different ways. Most of them, in the case of Maple Grove, their express service, they contract with Metro Transit. Plymouth, I believe, contracts with a private entity, a private provider, as the other opt-outs do as well. They have various agreements over service areas or coming into another service area. But for the most part, the funding flow is from the council to these cities, and then the cities can provide their services or contract with the council or others to provide it.
Sounds good. And we can follow up later, too, but I'm glad we're having some discussion. That's the purpose of the hearing. So don't want to bog you down too much, but
Sure.
I want to take member questions as they're relevant.
Happy to, Mr. Chair.
So please proceed. Thank you.
So these providers, as I mentioned earlier, were formed through legislative authority in the 1980s, in the time that MTC was under significant pressure both to respond to high ridership from the energy crisis, but also concern over coverage into developing areas around the region. The legislature, recognizing that property taxes were the source of revenue and that areas were not getting the funds that they were paying into the property tax, gave permission for cities in the region to form their own agencies, and 12 did so. 10 of those cities operate under joint powers agreements as 2 transit providers. So Minnesota Valley and Southwest Transit are joint powers authorities of the members that have authority from the legislature to operate their service. As funding has changed in the region, as I described earlier, from property tax to motor vehicle sales tax is now the primary source of funding for these, although sales tax funds are more recently set by council policy and are allocated to these providers. Collectively, these cities provide about 19% of the region's population, receive about 12.5% of motor vehicle sales tax funds, and provide around 4.5% of the region's ridership, and we'll describe that upcoming. Metropolitan counties and MnDOT also have important roles in the region's transit system. Counties have ongoing roles supporting mobility management generally, and specifically in rural portions of the region are involved in various programs But the public transportation role is primarily focused on funding. Counties have significant roles in transitway capital funding, and until 2023, were essential for transitway operating funds assistance to the Met Council, who then implements and operates the transit system. Regional rail authorities levy property taxes that support regional transit as well. And there's also transit-eligible local option sales taxes that each of the counties have in place. Finally, 17% of the sales and use tax and the transportation advancement account funds are used in part eligible for transit complete streets and greenhouse gas offsets. The transportation advancement account was part of the 2023 legislature. That is on a phase-in schedule. Right now, I think it's around 5.5%. By 2033, that actually grows to 56.5%. So that funding source will increase tenfold in the coming years. MnDOT also has an important role in
If we could just pause for a second, Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you, that ramping from, can you go through that again, and what is ramping? Is it of the seven? Yeah, can you just be very specific on what that is?
Yes, Mr. Chair, others on the committee may be better able to respond to this, either Mr. Lee, but it phases in over time, with a portion of funds continuing to wrap up to the counties and a portion of the funds contributing to the highway user fund. But Mr. Chair,
Mr. Lee?
to the committee.
Mr. Chair and members, the Transportation Investment Account is funded by two revenue streams. The first is the delivery fee, and the second piece is a portion of the auto parts, the general sales tax from auto parts. A portion of that goes to the general fund, a portion of that goes to the Highway User Tax Distribution Fund, and a portion of that goes to the Highway User Tax Distribution Fund. In statute, the portion going to the Highway User Tax Distribution Fund and the Transportation Investment Account increases every year for, I believe, 10 years, starting in.
What is the rest? Thank you, Mr. Lee. What does the rest go to? So I guess it's taking a greater portion. What's being shrunk? Is it general fund stuff?
Mr. Chair and members of Kraft, the general fund that share decreases.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Continue with the presentation then.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. MnDOT also has a very important role in the transit system, especially as it relates to transitways. MnDOT is a technical partner and an implementation partner in implementation of projects. So projects on the trunk highway system, but also fixed guideway projects where the council partners very closely with MnDOT to leverage their expertise and in some cases, as required by the legislature, oversight of implementation of the system. MnDOT also manages federal funds. MnDOT is the designated recipient of some sources of transit funding, especially for rural areas in the state that we use within the region, as well as transportation planning funds that we use executing our duties as the Metropolitan Planning Organization. The next section of the presentation pivots into transit ridership and service hours. So these two charts show the service provided and the ridership on the left, service on the right, between the operators of public transit within the region. Met Council is the largest operator, providing over 95% of the transit ridership within the region, and then suburban providers around 4.5%, as I noted earlier. Within that, MVTA provides a little over half of the suburban transit provider ridership, Southwest Transit around 1%, and then a little bit less than that for each of Maple Grove and for Plymouth. Maple Grove's transit rides delivered by Metro Transit are included in the Maple Grove total on this slide, although that's harder to split out in service, so it's combined in service hours. The chart on the right shows service hours. The council provides 91% of service, and then the other providers, as shown on this slide, provide the remainder.
Representative Sensimura and Representative Kraft, you have a question too?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I promise I'm not trying to pick on Maple Grove because I have another Maple Grove question. But I think I am trying to understand. We heard a lot of concern from different opt-out providers when Representative Kosnick brought the bill to phase out the opt-outs, and so I think what I'm trying to understand is if you say that in here about a little over 200,000 Maple Grove rides are delivered now by Metro Transit. Do you know the number for how many rides Maple Grove is providing themselves? Like, if we were to get rid of the opt-outs, how many rides are we talking about that they are providing that they would no longer be providing?
Mr. Chair, Representative, I don't have the specific number in front of me, but it would be that 4.5% overall of nominally in the neighborhood of 50 million rides a year.
Just Maple Grove.
No, sorry, that's all the providers. Maple Grove is a little less than 0.5% of all the rides.
And
Go ahead.
And that includes the 200,000 that are done by Metro Transit.
Mr. Chair, Representative, that's correct.
Okay, I will try to work backwards and figure out that.
Yep, and we can follow up.
We can follow
later,
up,
too.
certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just following up on that, does Metro Transit provide all 100% of the rides that Maple Grove does, or do they do some that are not provided by Metro Transit?
Mr. Chair, Representative, the Metro Transit provides the express service, which is all of Maple Grove's fixed route rides. Maple Grove holds a separate contract with another entity, a private provider, that provides their demand response or their dial-a-ride service separately. The specific allocation between those I don't have in front of me, but we can certainly follow up with the committee.
Yeah, and I don't remember if that was part of the other presentation or not, but I think that information is available, but go ahead.
Thank you,
Representative
Mr. Chair. Yeah, I was just following up on Representative Murrow's. The transit service hours versus ridership hours is what, just the number of hours that a vehicle is operated? Is that
Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
This slide will discuss how the council allocates funds amongst transit providers in the region. There are basically three categories that we'll work in, and then we'll work a little more detail about how the regional sales and use tax functions. Motor vehicle sales tax, as I mentioned earlier, is an important and has been for decades an important source of transit funds. 34.3% of statewide motor vehicle sales tax supports metropolitan area transit operations, with another 1.7% for greater Minnesota transit, and then the balance for highway and roadway uses for various purposes. 21.5% of that 34.3% is by statutory formula. The legislature directs 17% of the 21% to the suburban providers based on a complex formula and statute, and the other 82 or so % is used by Met Council. 12.8% is allocated by council policy, and that directs 4% of the 12% to the suburban providers, which is around $6 million a year. So that was adopted in 2018 by the council and has not changed since. It's split according to a formula that was developed by the council working with providers to sub-allocate that 4.3% amongst the suburban providers. When we put these together, it's a little over $48 million per year, which is 12.4% of the metro area invest is allocated between that combination of statute and council policy.
Do you want to wait until the end of the slide, or do you have a question now? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on that middle portion, did we,
We'll
are
do-
you done with this slide, or?
I was just covering motor vehicle sales tax. Now I'll move into the middle.
Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the regional sales and use tax, as I mentioned earlier, had a significant change for how the region is funded. It replaced state and county transitway operating funds, which is essential to how we consider this. The council looked over 25 years to determine how to allocate these funds because of the extent to which it replaced state and county funding sources in operations. The council then allocated remaining funds based on population between the council's service area and the suburban providers within the 7-county region. That results in a 4.55% allocation to suburban providers, which splits out, as shown on the slide, and amounts to around 20 million estimated 2026 distribution.
Representative Cagle, Chair Cagle.
Thank you. My question was to that part. So if we had allocated the funds based on ridership, what would that percentage be? Do you have that?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative, that actually is how the council provided funds on an interim basis between late 2023 and through 2025, was based on ridership. And that would have followed the amount shown on this slide. So a roughly similar number. It was a lower number in 2023 and 24 that the suburban providers had proportionally.
Thank you.
Council policy also reshaped how other sources are distributed. Transit debt service levy equivalent funds are allocated directly to suburban providers now, depending on the amount of tax that is levied in those cities. Although I'll note those are allocated as sales tax funds, not as levy dollars for debt service and bond rating reasons. We substitute the funds that are provided. Federal formula funds are allocated under the full federal formula. Prior to this policy, they were actually allocated based on a different formula, but that has been revised to just fully use the federal amount, while also changing the recipient relationships that providers have. Providers had been subrecipients of federal funds, but actually the council, as providers had requested, allows providers to now become direct recipients. That makes them fully accountable for conformance with federal terms and conditions associated with transit dollars, and also provides a little more flexibility over the timing and types of funds received, and increased amounts. The council policy also allocates other sources as directed by law. There currently aren't other allocations set in law, but provides for that. And of course, providers retain their own fair revenue, retain interest earnings, advertising, et cetera, from other sources. So all told, we estimate around 90 million in total distributions to replacement service providers in 2026. Over time, this amounts to about $4 billion in our policy that we used as the basis for allocation. I'll continue to describe how we allocate this and how we came up with these allocations in subsequent slides. This flow chart shows the sales and use tax allocation. On the left side of this slide is as directed by law. On the right side of this illustrates the council policy that I described a moment ago. So 100% of the sales tax goes toward transportation, and state statute directs that 83% to the council, 17% to metropolitan counties, and then it further directs how each entity uses those funds. So in the case of counties, it's directed to bike ped, to roadway, and to transit or complete street uses, as shown here, 41.5%, 41.5%, or 17% respectively. Within the 83% coming to the council, that is primarily for transit uses, but it is also allocated to the Transportation Advisory Board for active transportation uses. And so over the last couple years, the TAB has been very busy developing its approach to allocate those funds. The council will be seeking solicitations for active transportation projects beginning next month. And the TAB is directing several tens of millions of dollars a year toward active transportation projects across the metro, and actually just published a final report that issues the guidance of how it plans to allocate these funds. There is not a local match requirement associated with these projects. There are significant amounts of funding available. This is an accessible source of funding for communities in the region that the membership of TAB is very excited to put into projects. It also has already made progress in implementing projects using these funds. But the bulk of funds coming to the council are actually used for transit. This is directed by Met Council policy that largely implements state law. Within this, actually, about 3/4 of the sales tax over the next 25 years actually replaced other sources of funding. The state structural operating deficit, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, was coming due. That corresponds to about 20% of the overall sales tax. The state transitway operating funding source, the law directing state general funds for half of transitway operating costs was revised and no longer exists and has been replaced by this source of funding, other than the continued general fund appropriations that had remained in place. And then county transitway operating funds are no longer permitted or no longer included within transitways. The council must spend only sales tax as the remaining cost of the transitway system. So that is directed by law, as is safety and security improvements in the system, such as through the TRIP program that Metro Transit has implemented. So those sources, either directed or intended by the legislature to fill the structural operating deficit, comprise the bulk of the sales tax. The remainder of the sales tax, roughly 25% over a 25-year period, is allocated on a population basis between the council and suburban transit providers.
I believe Representative Jones, and then we'll go to Rep. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Carlson, so just trying to make sure I understand this flow chart, because, yes, from the left to the right, like, that's, I understand how the money is flowing up until the 95% transit, or yes, sorry, the 78.9, in the middle. From there, it's not flowing to the state structural operating or state transitway or county's transitway operating. You're just showing that that's where money would have needed to come, like been filled previously. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative, that's correct.
Okay. Representative Anderson?
So can you explain the state operating deficit? So I wasn't on the transportation committee before. So how was that filled in the past? Was that general fund dollars or how?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative, in large part, it was a looming problem over time. It was filled through one-time non-base appropriations from the general fund. Then it was funded by federal COVID relief dollars, and then in 2023 there was a large amount looming as a required amount of money to continue the system. That was filled by the 2023 sales tax.
Okay, thank you.
Good. And I had a question, but then I peeked ahead to the next slide, so I think we should just proceed.
To detail out, Mr. Chair, some of these sources, especially that related to replaced funds from the 2023 legislation, we show that here, and we show the slide before was based on a 25-year projection that actually, as the system grows, would require a bigger percent. But just looking ahead 5 years, the average annual amount from the structural deficit would have been $174 million. $109 million replaced county transitway funding that was set up for operations, and then state transitway operating funds as well. So that was around $50 million a year, but growing over time as the system grew. In total, that amounts to around a little over $300 million a year, or over 5 years, $1.7 billion. 72% of the tax over the next 5 years, but then it would actually grow, that percentage would grow as the system grows, especially in transitways over time.
So, Mr. Carlson, just the total down there where it says total operating cost relief, state and county, this is for operating our transit that used to be borne on the counties?
Mr. Chair, $109 million on the counties, and then the other amount on state, either general fund anticipation or what was directed by law for transitway operations for light rail.
Okay. Gotcha. Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So is the 333 the total that was from the previous chart, or what portion of the previous chart does that overlay with?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative, this corresponds to the three categories on the upper right side. So this is really focused in on the replaced sources that the sales tax coming in 2023 relieved of either obligations or anticipated funds from the state for structural operations, for transitway operations, or for the counties in their role in the system.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, the committee also requested information about county transportation sales tax. MnDOT actually recently published a report that contains reporting from counties. I'm not prepared today to go into a lot of detail in this area, but the report is linked here, and certainly others could respond to questions on this. This is one source. This is the local option sales tax that is included in that reporting. That report also includes the Transportation Advancement Account, as mentioned before, regional rail authorities, as have been mentioned in this presentation, the 17% share of the Metropolitan Transportation Sales and Use Tax, as well as the local option sales tax shown here. The MnDOT report contains information on expenditures. It contains information on revenues. It contains lists of projects that will be receiving these funds, as well as information that the legislature required in that report for categories of spending. So this shows one element of those funds, but there are others as well in the report that the committee can reference.
Can I ask a question?
Representative Anderson, or
Yeah.
are you done with the slide?
Done with this slide, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Representative Anderson, please.
Just, can you say this again or clarify this again? So this, the county transportation sales tax, so that's not just their share of the whatever it is, 75 cents or what, it's also their county, right? Because each county has 50 cents.
Yeah,
Okay.
Mr.
So
Chair,
it's for
Representative.
50, yeah. So it's both? And, thank you.
Mr. Chair, Representative Anderson, this is only the local option sales tax shown in this table. The report that is referenced here contains this local option sales tax, the county share of the metro area sales and use tax, Transportation Advancement Account, and Regional Rail Authority funds. So this is one piece of several that are included in that, as are the county's planned expenditures on projects and details about some of those projects.
Okay, just to follow up, so this is just their 50 cent, their point, whatever it is, half a cent, okay?
Yeah,
It has nothing to do with the state, the metro transit tax? That's what you're saying, right? And then, but this isn't necessarily dedicated to transit, it's supposed to be dedicated to, whatever, not travel, I guess. Is that a better word?
Yeah.
Thank you. Roads, bridges, whatever they want. Is that right?
Mr. Chair, Representative, that's correct. This is transportation funding available that the counties collect through their issuance of a sales tax for transportation purposes. It's one of several sources of transportation funding.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay. We got Representative Chair Cagle, then Jones, and I may have a question if it's not covered.
Just kind of to piggyback on Representative Anderson's question, during the 23 session, the TTA, we kind of directed them on how to spend that money. So active transportation, complete streets, road construction projects. But I also wanted to note that not all of the counties do have the 50-cent local option sales tax. And so some of the counties aren't leveraging their the metro counties aren't leveraging their sales tax to the best of their ability, as well as they're not enacting the wheelage fees either. And so we're taking the tough votes here, and they're not.
Representative Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, similar kind of question or confirmation as Representative Anderson. So that table that you have there, that's essentially representing the 17% that we see from the flow chart. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, no, it is actually the local option sales tax. The 17% is also within the reporting that this is drawn from, but is a different compilation, different table within that report.
Okay,
A follow-up, or, so that, a little bit of my question, I guess we're all kind of curious about this. I think Representative Cagle brought up a good point. Some counties are exercising their local option and wheelage tax, some aren't. Is that, and maybe you want, is that why we see the big disparities in the different counties from $3 and $4 million to some of the smaller counties up to, you know, 740 million just in the next 5 years for the largest county? Is that why, because of the options of that, or are there, does this include some usage or not usage of their funds? Is that reflected in here?
Mr. Chair, this table reflects projected ending balances in this, so it would be a mixture of inputs, expenditures, and then resulting in these, you know, and carry forward, resulting in this as the projected balance for this source alone. So that's what is reflected in this table.
Okay, and if we have some extra data, maybe, input? Is there anything extra you want? No. We're good? Okay, so this is projected cash that the counties are sitting on.
Mr. Chair, these are projected end balances. I think, you know, any specific questions on these would be best suited to the source of this data, which is the counties as compiled by MnDOT.
And I do have a copy of this report in my office, and I've seen it, I think we got it emailed to us. Haven't gone through the totals of it, but inside there, does it talk about, I think you mentioned, just to clarify, projects or upcoming projects that counties may be using or have used? So for instance, Washington County, I think they just are kind of finishing up a project.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the report is about 91 pages long and has a lot of detail in it, including project-specific allocation and listing. And there's quite a bit of detail. There's categories of investment that the legislature requires reporting on. So this is just one snippet of a long report.
Great. Anybody else? Oh, we do, okay. Sometimes I'm not sure if you guys are just looking at me because you're listening or if you have a question. Chair Ream, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair Kosnick. So I guess I'm curious about the numbers here. So when you're talking about transit ridership, are you also including like the state fair busing? You know, like in my area, we have a lot of buses that take people to the Twins games, concerts and stuff like that. Is that part of this transit ridership that you have listed here or not?
Mr. Carlson,
Chair,
and then you're going back to the hours of service, or
I'm looking at page 8.
slide 8?
Well, just kind of curious about, yeah, the percentages that you have for transit ridership.
Carlson.
Mr. Chair, Representative, the source of this information is the National Transit Database. So providers report to the what's called the NTD, and then the source of this is that federal source. In most cases, that includes any special event ridership. In the case of MVTA, that has not yet been reported to the NTD, but we did add those rides as we understand them from MVTA's broader reporting. So those rides are reflected here through that adjustment.
Yeah, it's a little confusing to me because I know like Southwest Transit, we provide a number of different services, you know, buses to a number of the games, Twins, Vikings, all that. I know Southwest Transit works with our food banks. They do deliveries. And I don't think that's factored into this. So I'm just kind of curious about the numbers, just wondering how we came to the number here. But
Yeah.
it seems like it's kind of might be an ongoing discussion here.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I believe the 1.07% in the case of Southwest Transit comprises the entirety of the ridership.
Yep. And if I could just editorialize or further the conversation with you, I think in my motivation and the bills, suburban communities really value some of those special event type things. We got to flesh out a little bit how that works with federal guidelines because there's a little bit of conflict there. But that's kind of where I think suburban transit may be wanting to move. And we've seen that even across the other parts of the region, more of those types of rides as opposed to the highly subsidized regular routes that are less used. I think Representative Kraft has a question. And then Joy and Kegels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Carlson, can you go to the last slide, the one you just had? Yeah. I'm curious, why are you showing us this? Like, what are we supposed to take from it? Because it strikes me that if these are the ending balances, we don't know how much they're, from this, how much they're collecting. I mean, there could be reasons why one is saving for so. I'm looking at this and I have no idea what to take from this.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative, today's presentation, it covers a lot of different topics that the committee requested information about. This is one of those. I think the specifics of inputs, outputs, project listings, you could certainly are included in that report and would probably be best answered from discussion with any of the individual reporters.
So,
Go ahead.
if I could, Mr. So what you're saying is you're providing this because you thought you were asked to provide this specific info. Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and for the committee's information, this was provided, MnDOT is required to do a report that's linked on here at the bottom. I think it's important to understand where the dollars come from from previous committee discussions. I think Representative Cagle made a good point to it's always good to just understand this. Some of the stuff is wide-ranging, and to hear it even 6 or 7 times is always helpful even. But I think part of it, Representative Kraft, was to understand we've changed the model from 23 and 24, and with conversations with Chair Tabke and Chair Cagle last year of what the intent of those changes were to the counties and how they're building out or not building out transit systems and what they're doing with the dollars is part of the reason why I think I wanted to bring it forward. I think Representative Jones, okay, there you go, and then Joy and Representative Cagle, you're shaking your head for right now, right? Okay. Please proceed, Representative Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Carlson, I have one comment and then I think 2 questions. So first comment, since we're kind of towards the end of the full presentation, just wanted to note what you had mentioned right at the beginning of the genesis of our transit system, that it spun out because of land development. So that it brings us back to land use and transportation and how they're linked. And I hope we can continue to think about how that linkage works, and so that we can continue to build out our transit system. So that's my comment. I will ask one question that maybe as a follow-up, if you could provide us so there was this graph with the pie charts. Would it be possible to get that in those numbers over time for the last 5 years or something like that as a follow-up for both ridership and transit service hours? And then my last question is around the Regional Railroad Authority property tax levies. Can you say more about what that is and where it's going?
No, Mr. Carlson. And I don't know that I fully heard the first question that somebody was talking to me, but about ridership. I just saw in my inbox, and Chair Tapke, you may have as well, a report, I think it was by the Met Council, and I started going through it, that had some ridership stuff, I think it just came yesterday. I could look it up, but.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative, we can absolutely provide the information over time for the last 5 years or so. We can take that as a follow-up. Regional Railroad Authority funding and expenditures are actually part of that MnDOT report. I'm not prepared today to talk further about it, but those may be questions either for that report or for the individual counties.
Follow up real quick. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Carlson. So just more about regional railroad authorities. Can you help us understand kind of the jurisdictional boundaries of those? And are all metro area residents taxed at the same rate? Trying to understand the kind of the structure and how that came about a bit more.
Mr. Carlson, and is it by county, the regional railroad authorities, right? It's kind of a funny name, but.
Mr. Chair, Representative, yeah, and they're actually organized as separate entities from the county board, but by and large, it's the same membership. And these entities do have a property levy. It depends on the extent that they're doing various activities related to railroad either acquisition or transit investment or other activities. Really varies county by county and certainly isn't unique to the metro area.
Okay, good. We have Representative Joy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the questions I have is I look through this report and I see the kind of money in Hennepin, and we've heard a lot in the media talking about HCMC and the financial difficulty they're having right now. So one of the questions I have, could these funds be used to help pay for that then rather than put in it raising taxes on the Hennepin County residents? Is that a possibility, like it is urgency or what we could do?
Mr. Carlson or maybe Mr. Burris, if you're, I know you're not Hennepin
Mr.
County.
Chair, I'm not prepared to speak to that. I do know this is a transportation sales tax.
Mr. Burris, what can the legislature do?
Mr. Chair and members, under current law, no, the funds are dedicated to various categories that are transportation-related. What the legislature could do is enact a law changing the allocations or rates or various aspects of funding for transportation, HCMC, or other purposes.
So Representative Joy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the things that I heard from Mr. Burris is this is a source we could use if we changed it here at the legislators. That's why we're here. So just another source. Thank you.
So there was a former member who's not in this chamber anymore. How he says, we're the legislature, we can do what we want. It's a lot harder than saying that. We have Representative Sensimura.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was a little worried the conversation was going to go here. So I guess my concern with this, and it's building a little bit about Representative Kraft brought up, I just am a little like, this is a point in time, right? This is just like, we chose a moment, we said how much money does each of these counties have, you know, like Washington, you know, they have negative money right now at this point in time. And so because they had just done a project or something, Hennepin County and Ramsey County have the most. They're our largest counties. They also have the most amount of projects going on. They have the most amount of operating. So I guess if we wanted to choose a chart that shows us that Hennepin County has a pot of money somewhere, that then we could say, oh, it should go to this other thing that we are talking about at the legislature, which is how do we save our safety net hospital? Like, I guess we found a chart that shows us that. I find it just like a little bit disingenuous in relation to the actual needs that we have as a county, the number of people that we have as a county, the number of tax that we are bringing in. So I think it's just a little bit misleading. Thank you.
Representative Scraba, then Anderson.
Thank you, Chair Kosnick. Executive Director Carlson, you're doing a great job, phenomenal. You seem very focused on what you do and very knowledgeable. The governor cut $40 million from urban transit. How does that affect the whole transit?
You're talking about the governor's recommendation,
Yes.
Representative Scraba?
Yes, to cut the urban transit in the overall transit budget.
Yeah, the general fund
Gen-
factor in there, Mr. Carlson?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative, the implementation of the sales tax in 2023 did replace a number of sources, including the structural operating deficit. The 2025 legislature reduced the appropriation further for particularly fiscal years 26 and 27. That is reflected in the state structural operating line that is accounted in our allocation forecast. The 2026 proposal is not reflected in that allocation. So our estimates reflect what the legislature has passed. This was done in 2025 and does not reflect the governor's 2026 recommendation at this time.
Follow-up? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So this added tax put money into the account, and then now, because it was structurally running deficit, and now, let's say the governor's budget or someone is coming in and cutting what was
part of the before because of this influx. Is that correct?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative, if further revision in our funding, in the transit funding were passed in law, it would increase the amount that would be in that category of replacing the state operating deficit.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. Representative Anderson, then we'll go to Rep. Myers.
I'll be quick. Met Council's flush with cash after the sales tax, and that's why they're shifting. I wanted, just an interest, Representative Jones. The Met Council, when it was first created, it was actually because of sewer issues originally. Regional sewer issues, there was issues and they weren't connected. And so it was designed originally to deal with sewer and water, and it has expanded since then, over time. So I think maybe you can verify that. And that's been the contention too with suburban communities, because they're, from a suburban perspective, they're getting too big in suburban business, but maybe he can reply.
Yeah, Mr. Carlson,
thank
feel
you.
free to chime in. I used to be on, we had just a local government, I guess we still do, local government subcommittee of state government, and we talked a lot more about Metro Transit governance and the other areas of the Met Council. But Mr. Carlson.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative, two really significant eras in the council's existence. Initially formed 1967 to guide regional growth and address some of the planning challenges that existed, and then 1994 reorganization to absorb many regional functions, including the metropolitan wastewater role. But the combination of those continuing over the 59-year existence of the council.
I think last year I gave a couple members like their annual budget. I think you get a copy as co-chair. There's a lot there, but it's very broad. No problem. Representative Myers.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Carlson. I'm just looking at slide 9 here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just trying to understand, of the funding that that the Met Council gets, what percentage goes to suburban providers?
Mr. Chair, Representative, it varies by source. So the MVEST tax, 12.4%, the sales tax, 4.55%, and then other sources as well. Today's presentation really focused on operating sources and uses. There's also capital sources and uses that are more into federal and property tax debt service levy funds. So the aggregation of all of those funds I don't have in front of me today, but the net of it is around 90 million per year.
Thank you,
Rep.
Chair.
Myers.
Follow-up question. Mr. Carlson, so in your, just from the slide, so you're allocating roughly, it says just, for example, from the regional sales tax, 4.5% to the suburban providers. Can you confirm to me that that's what percentage of that regional sales tax is being provided to them?
Mr. Chair, Representative, that's correct. That's the allocation basis. Population after accounting for the sources reduced by the 2023 law.
Okay, I think other members are good. So one question that I had, so one of the slides, or I think slide 9, the one that people keep talking about, that's just the local option that the counties have to exercise a 0.5 cent sales taxes, if I described that right.
That's correct, Mr. Chair, up to 0.5%.
Yep, and then, but there's also like a 0.75% sales tax too, but that's not reflected in this or your numbers in your presentation today, is that right?
Mr. Chair, in the report, not in this presentation.
In the report
In the
link
MnDOT
that
report.
that MnDOT gave us?
Yep.
Okay, gotcha, okay.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, again, that would report on regional railroad balances, transportation advancement account, metro sales and use tax, and this local option sales tax.
Okay, so this is just on one small subwindow of that. Chair Cagle.
Thank you. And if you could go back to that slide. What counties have the full half set?
Mr. Chair, Representative, I may need to defer to others on that question. I know it's a mixture,
I'd like to,
and that it's changed over time.
yeah. I'd like to see what those local option sales tax rates are for each one of those counties.
We'll see, our trusty resources will come up with that for us. We probably have members of almost, yeah, we have members of every county on there. Probably could just go around the room and say it. But you were wondering what the actual amounts are collected to, or what, but that's basically in here.
Yeah, I'd like, Mr. Chair, I'm kind of curious about what the local option sales tax is for each one of the counties. And is it something that we need to, kind of set a regional level? I don't know. But yeah, I know that there's a number of counties that aren't taking full use of those regional sales taxes.
Yep. We'll go to Representative Scraba for a second here.
Is keeping in line of this, and I'm sure I'm not going to get an answer, but do you have the total amount for each county, what local option sales tax and how much each one generates?
Mr. Carlson?
For
Chair.
all of the taxes that are used for this?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative, not with me in front of me today, but it certainly is the content of that report to the
All right,
legislature.
thank you.
Yeah, I have it on my desk. I guess I didn't bring it, but it's a lot to kind of digest through. But so I appreciate MnDOT sent me a copy in color as requested, and a large table, because in the report, you're trying to read it online, it's very difficult. But sure, we can get you a copy as well. But there's a lot there. I'm trying to digest it myself. Mr. Lee?
Mr. Chair and members, so the local option sales tax for transportation by county is for Anoka County 0.25%, for Carver County 0.5%, for Dakota County 0.25%, for Hennepin County 0.5%, for Ramsey County 0.5%, for Scott County 0.5%, and for Washington County 0.5%.
Thank you for that, because I would have been wrong on my own county. Representative Green.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair. Could you send that to all of us? Thank you.
Yep, we can get that. Okay, just looking at my notes. If we don't have any other questions for Mr. Carlson or any comments on this topic, we can move on to the next bill. Chair Tabke, you're awfully quiet today. You feeling all right? Yeah. All right, well, thank you, members. Mr. Carlson, thank you so much for leading this discussion for us. I think it's healthy to just kind of understand where the numbers flow in that, especially since from the recent change and some new members, and again, always for more veteran members, it's good to go through. So thank you so much, members. If you have more questions, they are available to us anytime. So thank you for that. All right, we'll have just the informational hearing on House File 4693, Representative Joy and Mr. House-Laden? House-Laden? I never get it right. We'll let the room clear out a little bit there. Don't drop your phone. All right, I will, House File 4693 is in front of the committee. It is just informational, so we do not even need to move the file, but for the discussion purposes, there is a delete DE3 amendment. As we've kind of worked on this issue, please proceed, Representative Joy, and then we'll listen to the discussion and the testifier.
Thank you, Chair and members. This bill is a simple but important fix that brings fairness and clarity to how Minnesota treats defective license plates for the trucking industry. Minnesota trucking fleets have seen license plate failures over the last few years, occurring long before the expected life of 5 years. When those fleets seek resolution, some deputy registers waive the fees, others don't. So businesses are facing inconsistent treatment depending on where they go. House File 4693 clarifies in statute that defective, damaged, and/or lost or stolen plates are eligible for replacement at no cost. And importantly, to ensure deputy registers are reimbursed so they are not bearing the burden either. With me today, I have a testifier, John Houseland, and he will take it over from there.
Welcome to the committee again. Appreciate you being here and bringing this issue forward to us. Please proceed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Great to be inside on a beautiful spring day like this. Thank you for paying attention to the trucking industry and this issue that is important to us. As Representative Joyce said, Minnesota trucking fleets are experiencing tractor and trailer prorated plates. So in the trucking world, we have these plates that travel from state to state under the International Registration Plan. IRP is the shorthand. And so these IRP plate failures are due to corrosion and film delamination. I'm hoping in your packets you each have this sample. Is that in your packets there?
You might want to mail that or email that out to us.
Well, I do happen to have some copies if there's someone who
Okay,
can
maybe
assist in distributing
have the
these.
page. Thank you so much.
Unfortunately, you're getting the black and white version, so you're going to have to take a look at this one closer to see color. But you're going to see, I think even in the black and white, pretty clearly what is going on here. So the plates can become illegible. The stickers can detach, and some plates have literally fallen off due to premature metal wear. And since vehicle license plates are required to operate on the nation's roadways, fleets are obligated to promptly replace missing or defective plates once a failure has been identified. Tractors and trailers taken out of service until new plates, tractors and trailers are taken out of service until new plates are affixed. So as you can imagine, the process to replace a plate is significant. We've probably all done them on our passenger cars, but for a truck, it's a bigger deal. You have to take the truck into the shop. Then you have to take it off. Then you have to generate the paperwork to go fill out the form. Then you got to generate the check to do the form. Then you have to travel to the deputy registrar's office, which may be close, or it could be 75 miles away. And then, of course, you get it, you drive back, and then you finally attach it, and then finally, that tractor trailer can go back on the road. So it's a big deal. So the associated fees themselves are roughly $30, depending on what you do and where you do it. But there's an additional estimated $95 of indirect labor. So if you think about that, it's $125 of real costs and frustration experienced by the fleet due to no fault of their own. So I would ask if you had to pay $125 to replace your car plate, that would be a big deal. And fleets have multiples. Under this bill, deputy registrars will be reimbursed under what we believe is the no-fee transaction fund that was created by the legislature. So the statutory authority to waive the fees associated with defective, damaged, or lost or stolen IRP plates is somewhat ambiguous. Some deputy registrars are replacing these plates at no cost, while others are charging the fees. So this bill, as Representative Joyce said, simply clarifies that defective, damaged, or lost or stolen IRP plates are eligible for the no-fee transaction, and that the deputy registrars will be kept whole when conducting such a transaction. So back to the photo, just in conclusion. As you can see, you have all kinds of things going on, from the film peeling off to the metal corroding, and you don't have just the letters, but you have the sticker, all kinds of things that are important, because when we are stopped roadside, we need to make sure that these are there, they're accurate, we can't tape them on. We do try different things. Our shop mechanics have tried putting other things to hold the metal on, but sometimes it fails, so we're just asking for this consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you for working on this. I know it's been an issue, the ongoing issue for a couple of years, I believe. And so while it seems kind of routine, obviously we want the government to function and the basic services to be as efficient as possible. But so it seems like it's kind of easy fix kind of thing, but it really affects how we get from point A to point B and businesses.
And Mr. Chair, I just want to thank the Department of Public Safety, Driver and Vehicle Services. They did work with us on this language, and it's these conversations we've had with them. Thank you.
Okay, good. A couple member questions, Representative Scraba and then Representative Green.
Thank you, Chair Kosnick. I'm looking at DE3. Is that fair?
The way the bill was drafted, thank you, Chair. The way the bill was drafted, Representative, is in the original, it exempted all license. And then we did a DE working with the department, and that's why it's drafted just for commercial trucks.
Okay, so
Representative
D3.
DE is what we're accepting, yes.
So D3, okay, one of the question that I have is, when I read it, and I read it 3 times, I'm sorry, I'm not a reviser, but I'm not a policy, I'm kind of a policy one, but notwithstanding any law to the contrary, the commissioner must replace a license plate or sticker that is issued. So shouldn't it read license plate and/or sticker to include both? Because if the sticker's on the license plate, and I bring this up because I know how anal things can get in the real world. And then the next one, same thing, license plate or sticker. The one on the back, that stays the same because it's describing. And then the vehicle owner must surrender any available plates to the commissioner. And then instead of a plate, sticker, or filing fee must not be imposed, if the intent is not to have to pay anything, then it should read, the plate, sticker, and filing fee must not be imposed for a replacement. That way, there's no question about who pays for what. Just, you guys do this every day, and I'm just curious if I'm right or wrong, but go ahead.
We can just go to Mr. Burris if you like, just to provide some comfort language for Representative Scraba.
Mr. Chair, Representative Scraba, sometimes the phrasing is more along the lines of what you're suggesting, where there's a listing out and and it's comma delimited list, and sometimes say or both. In other cases, the context kind of provides some implied direction to where the interpretation would head. So, I could see an argument of phrasing it more the way you're suggesting. Some of the suggested language came from the department, and I think, in my read of it and my impression from where the department seemed to be at, it seemed to be fairly clear to all parties involved that it could be a sticker, it could be a license plate, or it could be a combination of the two. If members wanted phrasing that laid that out, that's an easy change.
Representative Joy.
And that Representative Scraba, thank you, Chair, that's why we're laying it over too, so we can continue to work on the bill and get it in the right path.
Yeah, sounds like it serves that purpose. Representative Green?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative Joy, for the bill. I have 2 questions. One is there, and you may not be able to know the answer to this, or maybe someone from Deep Transportation would be able to, but have we ever looked at how we create license plates so that this issue isn't happening? Is there any work on that?
Good question. Actually, we'll go, I think, both the testifier and Representative Joy.
I do know one thing, I'm going to tour the 3M facility so I can see how these are made, because they came to me and asked me to come and look at the facility where the license plates are made, and I'll let him fill in on that.
Mr. Chair, Representative, so I can say we've had good conversations with the Department of Public Safety. I've also taken the tour and had those conversations, and they have been working on it. And so you're not the first one to ask the question, and obviously Director Pong, this is under his area, so thank you.
And I think it is a proud Minnesota company that we utilize, and the tour, we did do it a number of years back. I don't know if anybody on the current committee was on it, but Director Pong, welcome to the committee, and share your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Pong Zhang, Director for the Driver and Vehicle Services Division. And yes, we've been working with MTA and John on this, and 3M. We've collected several hundred plates now, and we sent them in for analysis, and we've had 3M do their check. And part of it is that 3M has a 5-year warranty on the plate itself, but also part of it is I think these places are used in a little bit more rougher climates, rougher environment than our typical passenger plates, and so the durability is just not able to keep up with the need, and I think that's part of the reason why we work together on putting some language together that could help solve this issue.
Representative Green.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I was just curious about that piece. And then the other thing is like the cost of this, and like, is there a fiscal note? And I have to make a comment, because I think we heard a bill earlier about getting rid of the stickers for tab fees, right, to take that away, just to save money. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that that was something else, is like, that's part of the solve here. It could be. So, go ahead.
Nope, fair question.
Yeah.
Director?
Yes, we did put a fiscal note together on a previous version of the bill. So this version has, it's a smaller world of plates, and that is just the commercial vehicles. But it does include other types of reasons. So the original bill had just defective plates. This one also has lost or stolen, and so we just have to do a little bit more work to kind of get to that overall, to that estimate of what that cost will be. Roughly today, we do about $200,000-ish of plate replacements for either defective or stolen. So across the whole kind of universe of prorate plates, it's about $200,000 total. This will be some subset of that.
Thanks for the question. Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Green raises a bunch of the things I was going to do, but I'll expand on one area, on the plates. And it was interesting to see that these plates, not surprising, take an extra beating. So why not have a different kind of a plate? Maybe it even costs a little bit more for this application, because what you're doing now is great, but it's still like it's a Band-Aid, right? Because they still have to go back and forth to all the places and take it in the shop and all that. And I think it might be worth spending a little bit extra money and having a plate that is going to last and not have to take them off the road. So that was just my thought.
Anybody want to take that, or fair comment?
Yeah, I'd be happy to respond to that. So, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Kraft. That is a conversation that we've been having with Mincor, who produces our plates. Part of their challenge that they need to work through is they use kind of a big stock of material, and it costs a lot of resources to stock that material. And so having multiple stocks and then having to change out the machines for different width of materials, those are all kind of parts of the challenge. But we absolutely have been having that conversation with both Mincor and 3M, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can tell you that there is a problem with the residential plates too, because I had to replace my own. And so it was corroded. So it is happening more often, and it never did happen with the old plate. So we didn't have trouble with the stickers or the decal of it falling off. But so it's a problem with residential plates too. And it's the same cost and inconvenience. It's just not something that we should be incurring on people. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. All right, well, we'll lay that bill over. Any closing comments, Representative Joy?
Nope, look forward to continuing to work on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, we are done with today's agenda. I do want to just, again, thank the committee for their time and work and on the bills and discussion. I want to thank our pages, both Nick and Ben. Thank you very much. And nonpartisan, always. Made you work a little bit today, Mr. Lee and Mr. Burris. Thank you for revising amendments and bills and all the work that goes on behind the scenes. I think our partners in the audience utilize you as well, so thank you. Researcher Kyle Schwab, Justin Brill on our side, and the CLA's Kyle Baker, and then Tenzin is here. Okay, good. And Matt Bowman, thank you. Did I miss anybody? No.
Co-chair.
Fine. Excuse me? I got him, or I don't think you were here. We are very appreciative of Joe Marble. We will have some appropriate celebration at a more appropriate place and venue. So yeah, honestly, it makes my job a lot of fun. This year's policy year, a little less work than the finance year, but we do appreciate everybody that's worked in the committee, especially Joe, our people at MnDOT. Chair Tabke.
I said my thanks the other day, but I just appreciate everybody's hard, great work in transportation. We'll look forward to the future and what we can get done this year.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And this meeting is then adjourned.